Hello everybody, welcome back. It's Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Yo.
So this week our topic is we're going to help clear up some issues that we found with terminology. Encoding, encrypting, and hashing. We've had I know I've had at least one at work where we've gotten these things mixed up, and then I recently had a run-in on LinkedIn with somebody who thought base 64 was encryption. So we're going to go through these three topics real quick, and might be a little shorter podcast than usual. So what we're going to start out with is some news of the week, which you want to start out with your story, and I'll come up with one of my own here in a second.
What story do I have?
The Symantec one.
Ah, yes. Well, apparently the senior VP of Symantec basically said, hey, antivirus as we know it is dead. I'm like, what? Yeah. So he basically said, whatever we do today at Symantec is not going to fly anymore. So we don't make any money on it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, wait a minute. That's pretty much what they do, right? Yeah. I mean, that's their bread and butter, right? I think they do other things like backups or anti-theft and junk like that. But to say that the state of antivirus as he knows it is dead, that's a pretty bold statement coming from a company that got started and, frankly, I think makes a lot of money doing it.
Well, I think this senior vice president of information security, I think it's ballsy, but I think it's one of those things. It's like the elephant in the room. It's like somebody finally had the balls at that company to say, yeah, antivirus kind of sucks these days, and we're not going to rely. I think more. He said it wasn't a moneymaker. Now, I'm not exactly sure why he would call it not a moneymaker, because every time you buy a Dell laptop or anything like that, you get antivirus for 90 days. And from what I gather, they put all that crap software on those Dell boxes or, Gateway or whatever it is you buy these days to subsidize the cost of the laptop to bring the price down. And then you have the option later to buy basically a support contract, which allows you to download updates. So yeah. I would think that that's free and cheap money that the antivirus companies are going for. For the enterprise, yeah. AV probably is pretty much crap. It's only used now as a checkbox. I know PCI requires antivirus to be updating and on all machines. But as we learned from Michael Goff, it's 4% of threats, and there's 96% out there that go undetected or easily bypass antivirus. So
yeah, I mean, I think it helps for people who aren't in the IT profession. Helps them when they click links and keeps a lot of the bad stuff off their computer.
Yeah. Well, I was reading Brian Krebs's take on this, and he was saying he had kind of a quick evolution of how antivirus occurred. You had pretty much two guys sitting in a room looking at malware or viruses and writing up a definition every day or so and pushing it out. And then the virus writers got smart and just started inundating the market with thousands and thousands of these, and they couldn't keep up with it. So they bought companies and learned how to do what they called heuristic, scanning. So it would scan for bad things. Wasn't necessarily what you would call a host intrusion prevention or detection system. And then slowly it ended up going to that point where, you've got host-based intrusion detection and prevention systems. So I think it's going to go more towards that and less towards signature-based things. I mean, you're still going to require rules. You're still going to have... I think it's going to go like with a listening mode kind of thing, where you get a new box, you let the user use it for a few weeks with it in listening mode, and then you turn it on.
Interesting.
And anything that's out of the ordinary of what the user is doing, they either get flagged for like a UAC kind of prompt. Hey, we've noticed you're doing something that you don't normally do. Is this actually you doing it? And then you would say yes. And as it became more commonplace, maybe you started going to a new website on a regular basis, or you started using a new program, then that would slowly get whitelisted towards what was considered normal behavior for a user. So that way it'd almost be like a tailored solution for each person. So a manager would be checking email, Facebook, his Farmville, whatever, and then you'd have the tech guy who would have dozens and dozens of applications. He'd be going to other websites. He might be using different applications. I'm thinking that it's going to go more in that direction.
You think so?
I can't imagine why it wouldn't. You can't have a one-size-fits-all solution these days because there's just so many different roles in an organization.
Yeah, there are. And I like Michael's approach where it looks for executables, and you decide whether that executable is good or not. And then he has, signatures available for you. And, but that's for someone who's on top of things and really looking for that sort of thing. Like you said, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And,
with the Sniper Forensic Toolkit, like you said, you could whitelist pretty much all the Windows executables are legit. And then, through baseline configurations, that you're going to have IE. And, most people are now saying you should use a different browser while they're still trying to plug the IE patch. But you might have another browser like Firefox, Chrome, God forbid Opera, and you would try to keep, the idea would be in the enterprise to keep the software to a minimum, but you're going to have those outliers that are going to have, multiple OSs. They want to use their own file transfer programs, that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
I see that as being a way to maybe protect people, keep it from being a cookie cutter system.
Yeah, I like the idea of whitelisting. I mean, you're not going to run it until you say, oh, I know that that's a good executable, or I believe that this is, from a reputable source. So go ahead and run that. Everything else, it's not going to let it run.
Yeah, you deny all, and then you only allow certain things. Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. The typical antivirus is a blacklist solution. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was good. Go Symantec if you're going to, actually help protect the endpoint better. Hoorah to you guys. So I got a couple of things. I have a data breach for a hospital, or I have Libra SSL being portable. Which one would you like to talk about?
Data breach.
Data breach. Okay. So there was a doctor at a hospital in, I want to say, Pennsylvania that had his own laptop or personal device, they didn't specify if it was a laptop or not,
okay,
on the hospital's network. And apparently he'd been using it for his job, and he had data on there. And
so this was his, not hospital provided?
Yeah. So
okay.
This happened in 2010, so this just came to light recently. 6,800 people at the New York Presbyterian Hospital and Columbia University. $4.8 million is being spent by these people in fines, making it's the largest payout in history so far for this kind of thing.
So what happened?
Well, the idea was this doctor was using a computer to, do his job, and he didn't want to do it anymore, and he went in and tried to remove the network configuration, I believe, from the computer that he was using, his own private computer, and ended up leaking about 7,000 patient records to the internet. You can find them apparently on internet search engines, and
wow.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how he managed to, they're saying, in quotey fingers, errantly reconfigured. And this caused an inadvertent leak of certain patient data to internet search engines. My guess is he accidentally turned on something like AES and hooked it up to his home network or something, and he had patient data sitting on the box, and that,
and Google spidered it or something?
And Google spidered it. That's the only thing I can think of. Yeah, but he was caused 6,800, which, as you know, anything more than 500 patient records breach is considered a major breach by the Office of Civil Rights. So that's why they're having a massive fine from the Office of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Office of Civil Rights.
Well, first of all, you shouldn't have that many patient records on a single device, especially one that's portable.
Oh, you're
like that.
You're a sweet kid, Mr. Betcher. You're a sweet
Yeah.
kid. How many?
Yeah, I know.
How many news stories have we heard? I can remember at least 2 or 3 from the Veterans Administration where they had several 100,000 PI information for veterans, both past, present, and military people currently. It's a They don't use they didn't have FDE, they didn't have full disk encryption, so obviously these people left it in their car or whatever. But this guy obviously wasn't following the rules because it was, from what I understand, his own personal laptop. So he may have been violating, the several IS requirements. If they didn't have a BYOD or bring your own device type policy, he was setting that up illegally.
Yep, bad juju right there.
Yeah, and when I worked as a consultant, I saw this a lot. Granted, I was only a consultant for 6 months, but I did go to several hospitals. The doctors at hospitals seem to kind of run the joint. They're not the drivers of technology, but they also stymie technology innovations, because you either have the 80-year-old doctor who doesn't want to use electronic health records because he doesn't understand the newfangled device.
Right.
Or you got the guys who want to bring their iPads in because the laptops or the tablets that they've got at the hospital are not good enough, and they want to use the new hotness. Yeah.
Yep.
And by ancient, it may be like a year old, but because it's an iPad and they like using an iPad and they don't want to use a Windows box or something, they think, oh, I can just bring mine in, hook it up to the wireless network in the hospital, the private one for the hospital and not the public one for like sitting out in the waiting room, and just start looking at patient records on it without any encryption. Not necessarily, they'll download a PDF of somebody's medical record and put it on their tablet. And that's a violation if they don't have proper encryption methods. So
exactly, yeah.
It's interesting that this was in 2010 and it just finally showed up. It was just finally disclosed. So
really,
yeah, maybe they just finally decided to. It may have gone through some kind of lawsuit or something that had to be kept mum, and it just finally the settlement was reached. So, but it took 4 years. I don't know if they had notified people that 6,800 patients had their medical records online until now, which would have sucked because those patients had medical records out there for 4 years almost. But yeah, it's a nasty business all around, and it won't be the last time we hear anything like this. I'm just glad that they got fined for it, because $4.8 million is a lot of money for a health system. I don't care who they are.
All right. Well, where are we going? Encryption?
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about the 3 things. I'm gonna tell my Bob story first. Actually, I really want to name and shame this guy because he could really use it, but I doubt he listens to the podcast, so it wouldn't make any difference. We were working on a project that required an update of the technology that we were using currently. And I think it had something to do with files or something. And he said that, to store the files, we were going to use, currently we were using MD5 encryption to store, information about the file. And I said, MD5 is not encryption. It's a hashing mechanism. And he looked at me like I didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
So this was face-to-face or what?
Yeah, this was in a meeting with other people.
Oh.
And, I called him out on it because I'm kind of a dick. But, I can live with myself when I do this because I was fully in the right here, which happens rarely, apparently. So, I had to explain to him what a hash was and that it's a fingerprint of a file that you use for integrity purposes. so that you can make sure that the file, when transferred, has not been modified in transit to the destination. Whereas what he's thinking of as encryption is something totally different. I think he got it, but he probably won't make that mistake again, and I hope that he looks it up. So my second quick Bob story is I was on LinkedIn. I'm a member of several groups on there, and some guy in the certified information, the CISSP group, came on and said, hey, look, here's a cool new app. I believe he created it or a relative created it. And one of the things it touted was encryption of the SMS texts on your device. And I believe it was an Android device because it was in the Google Play Store.
Okay, cool.
And when you look at the screenshots, when you go into the Google Play Store and it shows the screenshots, it said, you can select your encryption levels. And the two that he selected for the encryption levels were AES 256, which, hey, I'm all in on that, and base 64 encryption. So I replied back to his post and I said, I hope you're not trying to make people think base 64 is encryption, because it is not. It's an encoding method, and it's very easy to crack. And he kind of laughed it off and everything. And then I posted it. I posted the link to that app on the 2600 group Facebook page, and it got quite a few laughs. And I believe it was flagged by one or two of the people in that group for being misleading or faulty. So, And that's when I thought it was time to talk about the differences between encoding, encryption, and hashing.
All right, fair enough. Well, we all know what hashing is, right? Because you just explained it. That's fingerprint. Basically a representation of the data.
Yeah, or you can go back to episode 1 of Breaking Down Security, where we talked about hashing pretty well in depth. I mean, you're right, it is.
Yeah, it's like a wood chipper. You throw a tree in a wood chipper and it chips it all up into little bits. And yeah, I like wood chippers. But anyway, encoding is kind of like XOR, right?
XOR, I believe ROT13 could be considered a form of encoding, or would ROT13 be an encryption? I mean, I believe that could be encryption, but it's just really crap encryption. Like uber crap encryption. I don't know,
I'd have to look it up.
No, encoding is anything that takes something and turns it into... Going from ASCII to binary, for instance, you have to use encoding for that. Or binary to ASCII, you have to use encoding for that, because maybe the data in a binary format doesn't necessarily work for the application, so you have to convert it thusly. Base 64, you have capital A through capital Z, lowercase a through lowercase z, 0 through 9, plus, and the /, the one that leans forward. If you're looking at it.
Right.
And that is, along with the equal sign, are what you use to encode messages or something into a base 64 format. And that can be used by a number of different things. You can turn messages into it. It's not
now,
encrypted, though.
Why would you use them? Why would you encode something?
Well, I mean, if, like I said, if you're trying to send something through an application in a binary format and it doesn't take it, maybe it will take it in an ASCII format. Or, for instance, PGP. When you create a PGP key, you can convert it to ASCII to kind of, make it easier to digest in many cases. They call it ASCII armor.
Whoa.
Yeah. Go look up the base 64. There's whole websites on how to do it, which was the reason that I raised the flag to this guy, because I was like, you can go online, and there are websites that basically will take a stream of text, and you copy it into a text box, and then hit encode, and it will encode it directly to base 64, and vice versa. So I said, you're not gaining anything by using the base 64 as, quote, encryption. Now, the AES 256 is fine. That's perfect. Basically, encoding, I think the best way to explain encoding with regard to the fact it's not encryption is there's a key that is used to encrypt, and it has to be secret, and it's secret.
Yep.
But it's fully reversible. Encoding and encryption are fully reversible because you have to be able to encode and decode. Hashing, on the other hand, you can't get the original file from the hash. And I think that's an important distinction.
Right. Yeah. AES encryption. Now, I guess in the app, some kind of a secret key had to be exchanged, right? There's got to be a key between the two so you can decrypt these messages or whatnot.
Well, from what I understood, the idea was you put the SMS texts or whatever in they sit in a store on your phone. And the idea is you've got people like law enforcement or your ex-girlfriend or a girlfriend or a wife or something, and you don't want them necessarily to see your SMS messages. So you can use this app to encrypt them on the device. It's not necessarily like a PGP thing where you have to share a public key with somebody and then they can decrypt your messages that way. This was just specifically on the device, which is a great idea if he'd have just left the base 64 encryption off. If he'd have said, you can use elliptic curve and AES,
Yeah.
that would be two perfect forms of encryption that you could have used. And then he could have said, left that whole base 64. It's a little peccadillo I have that,
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's what he ended up doing. Like we mentioned in our first episode, there's multiple different types of hashes. You have the MD5, you have the SHA-1, the SHA-2, the SHA-3. There's I think MD160 is one, and then there's the RIPE hashes. The big ones are SHA and MD5. MD5 less so because it has collision issues, is considered obsolete.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just review that episode. This app was supposed to encrypt messages that he already received that were stored on the app unencrypted, or on the device unencrypted, and it would just encrypt them for him or encode it, whichever.
That's what I understood. It was a
okay. Is it still available?
I believe it is. I'd have to go back and look through my LinkedIn history, but I believe it's on there. I want to say it's called Cryptos or something. It was he had a very Greek name. The author had a very Greek name, and I believe the last names kind of matched. I don't know if it was him exactly.
Yeah.
And the name of it was like Cryptos or something, which is very, it's the Greek name for secret or whatever it is.
So I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
Which encryption method is proven to be unbreakable? I mean, they proved it.
Can I phone a friend?
No.
Can I phone a friend? I don't have enough people to take a survey here in the house, but...
Okay. Well, it's a one-time pad. You remember that?
One-time pad.
One-time pad.
Oh, great.
So
you put me on the spot, made me look like an
sorry
idiot.
about that.
No,
but anyway,
okay.
Yeah, fun fact. One-time pad.
Encryption technique that cannot be cracked. Oh, wait a minute. Wait.
I told you you'd remember it.
No, I looked it up on the Googles. It says if used correctly.
That's right, if used correctly. So you have to not use the same key more than once.
Okay.
You have to have random generated key.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. And you have to keep the key secret, of course. And it's impossible to break it.
Yeah.
If those conditions are met. So, yeah.
That's pretty
so
interesting.
if you have a secret message and you don't want anybody to find out what it is, one-time pad. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
They'll never break it.
So that was first described by a Frank Miller in 1882. And the one-time pad was reinvented in 1917 and patented a couple of years later. Derived from the Vernam cipher, named after Gilbert Vernam, one of its inventors. I'll be damned. See, I find the whole encryption and cryptanalysis thing very interesting, but I don't have the mind for the math. You got these people making, like Bruce
Well,
Schneier.
a few people do, right?
Well, yeah, and those people are uber smart, and that's why they work for the NSA and have doctorates in mathematics.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear that terrorist groups, after the whole Snowden leaking thing, are developing new encryption algorithms for their messages? I wonder how that's going to work out. Like, they're developing their own encryption.
Well,
It's interesting.
it takes several years to vet. I know that I don't know how it is for encryption algorithms, but I know that the hashing one for the newest SHA-3, which they took like several different hashing algorithms and it finally became SHA-3. I believe it was called Keccac, Keccac or something. But it took nearly, I want to say, almost a decade to get put into place. And if terrorist groups who admittedly may have some people under the hood that are, pretty smart with the maths, it could probably take them just as long to, create a viable encryption algorithm. And I don't think they have that amount of time. There was...
I'm skeptical that it's going to work out for them. I really am. Just because, they're starting to use them now, and it's only been, a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's enough time, know-how, vetting these things to see if they're breakable, because a lot of these algorithms are out there, and pretty smart people try to break them for many years before they're actually accepted.
Sure. And that's the point. That's, they
Yeah.
have to be vetted and tested, and then you find out things like the elliptic curve, was that DRBG that was packaged with some RSA software was bad back in 2007. They just recently said probably shouldn't be using that, even though most of the information security community had already known it was a POS anyway, and they stopped using it. You're talking about, you were talking about them creating encryption ciphers. That's more like OPSEC. They're trying to increase their operational security by, they don't want to use westernized, encryption, so they think they can do better themselves, which, as we've seen, anybody who usually tries and goes and makes their own encryption ciphers are pretty much, almost doomed for failure. They're peer-reviewed for a reason. You can't just go, yeah, we're going to go ahead and use that one. It's a long process. So, all right, well, it was going to be a short podcast anyway because there really wasn't a lot of content. I just wanted to kind of go over some definitions and kind of clear that up for people who may not realize that base 64 encoding, base 64 encoding, we kind of didn't touch a lot on encoding. There are other ones as well. You've got UTF-8, which is a format that most websites are put in. You have audio and video encoding and decodings. When you create WAV files and turn them into MP3s, you're encoding it into a different format that can be smaller, and it can be decoded by an MP3 decoder. So your MP3 player has special logic and special algorithms on there that will decode the MP3 stream. Like you said before the podcast, though, not every encoding has to be a one-for-one copy. You said
right. You
MP3s
could have some
are lossy.
loss.
Yeah, you're going to have loss.
Yeah, because WAV file may have sounds that the human ear can't hear. So why do you want to incorporate those into your MP3?
Well, they swear the true, I use quote fingers again, audiophiles swear that turning them into MP3s from the original waves kind of lose they say it's a warmth, or they call it the psychoacoustics, like the unheard sounds that are existing, because MP3s, when you convert it from wave to an MP3, it takes all the sound that is below and above human hearing and kind of gets rid of those, and that helps shrink the size down. It also does some other things with the waveform itself.
Sure.
But they say that the unconscious sound that you don't hear is, Fraunhofer or whoever created the MP3 codec says that that's just useless stuff and they pull it out. And for music, that may be the case, but if you're like what we're doing, we're talking here, you're not going to get a lot of extraneous extra on the outside that you have to worry about. So, in many cases, a lossless encoding or lossy encoding is okay. And like I said, encoding, you can take a bitmap, which is a huge file, and turn it into a PNG, which is a lossless format. So you keep a lot of the information in the encoding.
Right. It's like a zip for.
Yeah, it's like a zip file. Yeah, and then you've got JPEGs, which take 2 pixels next to each other and take an average of the value of those. So you lose some data, but you keep probably about 85 to 90% of the information, and you can't hardly tell the difference. So
yeah, well, you can adjust the quality of it too.
Yeah, depending on the compression, you lose more.
Right.
For that. So okay, well, that explanation kind of went longer than I thought, but that was good for the podcast, I think. Is there anything else you want to beat to death? Hashing? You want to talk anything more about the encryption bit?
I want to beat the dead hash.
Beat the dead hash. That's right. You're good?
Yeah. Yeah, don't false advertise. If you say it's encrypting or you say it's secure, then you cannot be using encoding methods. It will be not a lossless reputation.
That's right. Okay, so I guess that's it for this week. Check us out on Twitter, @BrianBreak, @BetYourPwned. I'm looking at maybe putting a Facebook page up for the Breaking Down Security podcast. Just a fan page if you want to like it. I may set that up this weekend. I'll probably tweet it out. It's kind of odd, tweet out a Facebook page.
Yes.
But, yes. So, yeah, we, love the fans. We've got a bunch of good stuff on our podcast. If this is your first time listening to Breaking Down Security, we got some great interviews. We're trying to get more interviews. If you want to come on and do an interview, if you've got topic you want to talk about or want us to talk about, please feel free to tweet us up. Guess that's it. Mr. Betcher, have a great week. And we'll see our listeners next week on Breaking Down Security.
All right. See you next week. Bye-bye.